Concept, age. A biologically determined period of life when language can be acquired naturally and effortlessly, and after which language is increasingly difficult to acquire. Language acquisition. Language acquisition is a process whereby children achieve a fluent control of their native language. The ability to get and understand the language is inherited genetically, but the particular language that children speak is culturally and environmentally transmitted to them. Children all over the world acquire their first language without tutoring. Native language acquisition is much less likely to be affected by mental retardation than the acquisition of other intellectual skill activities. Every normal human child learns one or more language unless he is brought up in linguistic isolation, and learns the essentials of his language by a fairly little age, say by 6. Language acquisition at age 1 to 3 years old occurs naturally. It is meant that a child is insensibly acquiring the language, but the fact is she can produce the language for communication. The process of acquiring the language at the age before 5 years old is called as golden age. This period shows the progress of language development from one stage to another.
Cognitive theory. Cognitive theorists believe that language is a subordinate part of cognitive development, dependent on the attainment of various concepts. According to this view, children learn about the world first, and then map language onto that prior experience. Additionally, cognitive theorists believe that language is just one aspect of human cognition. According to Piaget and his followers and Gleason, infants must learn about the world around them, which they do through active experimentation and construction. For example, the infant crawls around the floor, observes objects from all angles, and slowly develops a sensorimotor, literally, through the senses and more activity, understanding of the space in which she lives. History. Studying the exact causes and consequences of age sensitivity in language acquisition is not trivial. Language, and the mechanisms for acquiring it, are shaped by processes on 3 different time scales: learning, cultural evolution, and biological evolution. The exact mechanism behind language acquisition age effects is still unknown. Many different driving forces have been proposed. Some of them assume that the acquisition time frame is biologically determined, for instance coinciding with the decline of brain plasticity during development. Brain plasticity has been found to relate to hormonal influences and the changes that occur around the age of puberty. Practical applications of age in language teaching. Songs are frequently used to expand children's vocabulary. Stories or fairy tales are also another way to expand vocabulary and imagination. Kids should be corrected when they make a mistake on a word, without humiliating the kid. Kids should be involved in conversations, so they can learn new words, conversations in pairs or groups. Ask the kid questions and wait for him to answer. Let him be the one to speak. Do not anticipate what he is going to say. Teachers should give real pronunciation to the child. Parents shouldn't imitate the way a child produces the wrong pronunciation, because it can confuse the kid on identification the right or wrong words. Familiarize the child with animal sounds so that he can identify and repeat them. For example, with toys that make the sounds. Why is it easier for a child to learn language? Children grow and develop at extraordinary paces, and they learn information quickly as well. A child who is exposed to multiple languages at a young age has a much easier time processing and remembering the information they receive. For a child, learning language is part of their brain chemistry. They are literally built to absorb information. They do this in an unconscious state of mind, like they're learning and they don't even know it. Adults and older children have to consciously learn the information, which makes it harder, because information sometimes gets lost. Young children aren't formally instructed in language the way adults and older children are. They learn by being immersed in multilingual environments. They passively absorb the language through contact. When formally instructed, it is through games and songs, not verb conjugation and exams. In fact, adults also learn much faster through immersion, but the cost of immersion is much higher for adults than it is for children. Children have the time and energy to spend hours in environments that challenge their communication skills. The importance of age in first language acquisition. A famous example is Jeannie, who was found in 1970 aged 13, having spent most of her life until then in isolation. Of course, Jeannie's case is not so simple. Not only did she miss the critical period for learning language, but she was also horrifically abused. She was malnourished and deprived of cognitive stimulation for most of her childhood. After a year of treatment, she even started putting 3 words together occasionally. In children going through normal language development, this stage is followed by what is known as a language explosion. Children rapidly acquire new words and begin putting them together in novel ways. Unfortunately, this never happened for Jeannie. Her language abilities remained stuck at this stage, and she appeared unable to apply grammatical rules and use language in a meaningful way. At this point, her progress leveled off and her acquisition of new language halted. Researchers were also never able to fully determine if Jeannie suffered from pre-existing cognitive deficits. As an infant, a pediatrician had identified her as having some type of mental delay. So researchers were left to wonder whether Jeannie had suffered from cognitive deficits caused by her years of abuse, or if she had been born with some degree of mental retardation. Critical period hypothesis: a biologically determined period of life when language can be acquired naturally and effortlessly, and after which language is increasingly difficult to acquire. CPH span, from birth to late adolescence. The CPH was first proposed by Penfield and Roberts, 1959, and popularized by Lenberg, 1967. L1 studies were based on 1. Pathological studies of children who failed to acquire their L1, example, Jeannie, during critical period. Such cases were not a reliable source. 2. Developmental data about deaf children learning a sign language, which support the existence of CPH. Sensitive period. In sensitive period, there is a gradual decline in the ability to learn the language, yet still it's possible to acquire a language. The ability to learn a language declines gradually and steadily with age. Conclusion: in developing children's language, there are 6 stages as the approaches of first language acquisition. These are cooing, babbling, holophrastic stage, the 2-word stage, telegraphic stage, and later multi-word stage. We should follow each stage in order to learn the language correctly. There are some problems in first language acquisition: grammatical errors, phonological errors, incorrective utterances, imitation, repetition, correction, indicating the question, learning by experiences, and laziness.